Hello, everyone. This is our group presentation on the fairy tale The Three Little Pigs, and your presenters are Emily and.
Melanie.
So we're going to start off by explaining what we already know so far. So just by listening to the fairy tale's title, The Three Little Pigs, you're probably familiar with the fairy tale and grew up reading it. And it's so popular even though it was written in 1892. And Melanie will go ahead and explain the editor's background history.
So the editor was Andrew Lang, and he was born on March 31st, 1844, and he unfortunately passed away on July 20th of 1912. The education he received was at St. Andrew's University, Balliol College, Oxford, and Merton College. He was actually praised for his 12-volume collection of fairy tales, and The Three Little Pigs was not a part of this collection, but it was still very popular and loved upon by many people.
So now we're just going to discuss the upcoming topics throughout this presentation. So first, we're going to give a summary of the fairy tale. We're just going to give you a glimpse of what the UK version of the Three Little Pigs was about. And then we're going to go on and discuss the different versions between US and UK's The Three Little Pigs, the fairy tale, and the meaning behind it as well.
So the Three Little Pigs' names were Brownie, Whitey, and Blackie. And before the mother's passing, she wished for each of her pigs to have a house built out of the materials that they wanted. So Brownie wanted his house to be made out of mud because he loved mud, he loved playing in it, so he wanted his house to be made out of that. Whitey was the greedy pig, and he wanted his house to be made out of cabbage because he would always go steal others' foods. And Blackie, he was the smartest pig, and he thought that his house could be made out of brick. Instead, he thought more in a smart way rather than Brownie and Whitey. They didn't really choose the smartest material. So they each got to build the house that they wanted, and they granted their mother's wish.
So when the pigs went on and lived in their separate houses, a day after, the fox comes to Brownie's house and Whitey's house. And if we remember, Melanie mentioned that Brownie's the one with the house that was made out of mud, and Whitey's the one that chose a house out of cabbage. And those two houses aren't that stable, so the fox goes ahead and attacks them both and takes them to this house. The next day, the fox goes up to Blackie's house and realizes that he couldn't attack his house because it's made out of brick. So what he does is goes through the chimney of the house. But what the fox didn't know is that the fireplace was lit. So once the fox went down, he got burnt and he died. So Blackie's the one that ended up saving the day. He went back to the fox's house and grabbed Brownie and Whitey and returned to safety. And they lived happily ever after that.
Okay, so looking back, there's two perspectives. There's one from when we're younger and one from when we're already older. So the younger perspective is that we view this as a very innocent fairy tale, something that doesn't have any violence or racism because we just view it as a funny, nice little story about three little pigs. But when we're older, we view it as something that's vulgar, more violent, and that includes racism. And Emily will talk about this later. And it gained popularity because of its simplicity. It was so primitive and easy for kids to understand. And because of that, it gained a lot of popularity.
Yes, and when we discuss the different versions between UK and US, I put a picture of the US's version of the Three Little Pigs, and we see that the pigs are the ones that created their house. And I've noticed that in the US's version, it's less violent and less gory, and it actually has a lot more innocence than the UK does. And because the UK version has a lot of killing, a lot of death, a lot of like attacks and stuff like that. And the reason we noticed racism because of the characters' names, Blackie, Whitey, and Brownie. And Blackie was the one that actually ended up dominating over the white pig and the brown pig. So that's when we noticed a bit of racial discrimination towards Whitey and Brownie. So that was the different versions.
So here's a little overview about what we've already talked about. So we talked about the fairy tale itself and the overall meaning behind it. We talked about the different perspectives from when we were younger to then when we're older. We talked about the different versions, the UK and the US, and we talked about how it gained popularity and why it's still popular today.
Yes, and the reason we informed you and persuaded you is because in the beginning of the presentation, we actually educated you guys on the background history and the overall fairy tale itself, specifically the UK one. And we persuaded you by including our own opinion about the racial discrimination and the overall meaning behind it as well.
So here are the discussion questions. Here's the first one. Did you grow up reading The Three Little Pigs? And if so, what were your perspectives on The Three Little Pigs now that you're older? Did it change in any way after this presentation? And the second question is which version do you like the most? The UK or the US version? Which qualities did the version that you choose have that made it better?
So we want to thank you guys for listening to our presentation.
And please let us know in the comments if you have any further questions.
Thank you.